In the United States Army, there is some training that most individuals will probably go through at some point in their Army career, and that is going to NTC, otherwise known as the National Training Center. Let's talk about that. What's up, friends? Welcome to an all-new episode. In this one, we are talking about NTC, or the National Training Center. This is training that most soldiers would go through. When I was in the Army, I probably went through 5 or 6 maybe iterations of this training. It has also probably been a while since I've been to the National Training Center, but even like when I went at the beginning of 2000 all the way up until the very last time that I went to the National Training Center in 2009, only a few things here and there would change. So a lot of the things I'll probably talk about are probably still pretty relevant to the National Training Center. Some things may vary a little bit, but this will still help you kind of get a little bit of an idea of what NTC is like, what to expect if you're someone who is going to be going to it, or just curious as to some of the training that the United States Army does. So before we get started, make sure you are subscribed to this channel. Maybe think about enabling notifications so you can join the notification platoon and get notified as soon as new videos go live, or even live streams. So let's talk about the National Training Center, or NTC. So this is a 1-month training exercise that takes place at Fort Irwin, located in California, in the desert of California. So it is a very, very deserty environment. So it's, especially like if you're in the summertime, it's hot during the day and then kind of chilly at night because you get kind of used to that, being 80, 90, 100 degrees, whatever during the daytime in the summer. And then at night it drops down to, 60, 50, whatever. And it feels kind of chilly compared to what you were used to during the day. Now, leading up to this training, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of things you have to do to kind of get ready for this training, to prepare your equipment, because sometimes units will take some of their equipment with them. And it's pretty often that they will do this. They will usually load it by train, depending on your location. Sometimes you might drive it down to California. It just kind of depends on the location of where your installation is at and what equipment you want to take with you. Now, even if you are somewhat nearby, usually they don't want to, drive track vehicles down there. So sometimes you at least will have to, load up track vehicles either onto a train or maybe some kind of commercial semi or something to transport those, because that one's a little bit difficult to just drive down to the National Training Center. But maybe if you're located within a reasonable distance to the National Training Center, you might drive some of the wheeled vehicles in a convoy that takes forever to get down there. Every time I've done it, it's either been out of Kansas or out of Colorado, so we've always, rail-headed our equipment. And we won't take everything. We'll take certain items and other stuff we'll get at the National Training Center, which I'll talk about that as well. Now, they always have what is called like advanced party or the flea or whatever you kind of want to call it. You usually have different kind of terms for it, but you'll have certain individuals that will go out early to the National Training Center to help receive some of the equipment. So those individuals will spend a little extra time there. If you're one of those unlucky people, it's not super fun. I've only had to do that, I think, once or twice, where I had to be part of the advance party to help receive some of the equipment off the railhead. But you only end up leaving down there maybe a few days, maybe a week in advance before everybody else even heads out to the National Training Center. Now, that first week that you are there, that one is basically kind of like draw week, kind of preparation for the training kind of week. It has changed over the years like a lot. There was my first time being at the National Training Center. You had this little, shade area, they called it. It was basically just these metal tin roofs, and you would set up pup tents underneath those. You had to share with another soldier, and it wasn't the greatest kind of setup that you had to do. The last time I went, they actually have buildings that are kind of like rinky-dink little buildings that have insulation inside of them and just a bunch of cots, and you're all kind of set up in different areas based on company or platoon or whatever, and you have a cot that you sleep on. So a little bit better than like those first few times that I did at the National Training Center. So in that first week, you are drawing vehicles from the National Training Center, receiving some of your vehicles off the railhead or whatever the case might be, as well as getting these vehicles equipped with what is called miles gear. Miles gear is basically kind of like laser tag, you can think of it as. There's these sensors that go all over the vehicles. You also have some personal ones that you'll wear, and that's kind of what it's like. You have these little sensors that go on your weapons to be able to register on those kind of like sensors that are going on the vehicles as well as the body, to be able to register hits when someone is firing at you, whatever. So this miles gear gets equipped to the vehicles, and then you also get issued your personal miles gear that you're gonna have to wear. They do have like a kind of like a chow hall thing, unless it's changed. It's like an outside kind of chow hall. You have some shaded areas that you're standing up at, and you're just standing up eating for breakfast. I don't think they do lunch. I think you're stuck with like MRE or whatever for lunch. They may have changed since then. Maybe the last time we did it, they might have served lunch. I don't remember though. And then you also have dinner chow. There is a small little PX that you can go to be able to get some, snacks or whatever. And then a lot of people usually load up on that stuff before heading out to the actual training part. So that first week kind of involves that kind of stuff. Drawing your vehicles, getting vehicles equipped and ready to go with the miles gear, and then, eventually heading out to what is called the box. So the box is the desert piece. This is actually where training begins. That first week being that draw equipment stuff, and then 2 weeks of the actual training itself. So there is usually some kind of like mission that is involved with the National Training Center. Usually it's the Krasnovians versus the Danovians or something like that. They have some kind of like made up countries that they utilize in this training at the National Training Center. And basically playing the enemy is going to be those individuals that are actually stationed there at Fort Irwin. They're going to play the Op 4. Sometimes they also bring in other people to play Op 4 temporarily. It varies, but the majority of Op 4 are going to be individuals that are actually stationed there at Fort Irwin. That's their dedicated role at Fort Irwin, is to play the Op 4. They also have what you can kind of think of as referees. These are called OCs. So these are individuals that are probably coming from other installations to do these rotations as an OC, and they drive around in Humvees to kind of referee it. So to help with safety, to help determine when someone was killed, to do other kind of different things, involving kind of like a referee would do in a sporting event. And so during these 2 weeks, you have some kind of mission that you're out to achieve. That's also kind of based on your MOS, whether you are the assaulting asset, if you are the support asset, whatever the case might be. But everybody kind of has a role to kind of train in their MOS and do their job as if they were in combat. Now, in my experience, like the first time I did the National Training Center, it was very different from like the last time. The first time you were going out and you were doing it old school. You were doing these convoys, you'd go somewhere, you'd set up concertina wire, you'd set up fighting positions to have a 50 cal pit, and then it kind of transitioned over to more of the different style of fighting where you had FOBs and combat outposts, these little bases kind of set up that already had a perimeter set up with gates and buildings inside of them. I think even now they're kind of moving away from that and kind of doing a mixture of kind of the out in the open fighting with some of these FOBs, and it kind of mixes it up. So where you're at during this training could really depend. You could be on one of these kind of like FOBs or COPs or whatever, or you could just be out in the middle of nowhere setting up with your own perimeter and probably having to even put up camouflage nets maybe over your vehicles as well. So during these 2 weeks, it is a training exercise. They try to treat it as much as possible like a combat deployment would be, so it's very limited on things you can do. You're not gonna probably have any kind of access to like a PX or anything special like that. You're gonna probably still have breakfast chow possibly if you're on one of the areas where the cooks are at, and then dinner chow, but then lunch is probably going to be an MRE. Now, at the National Training Center, they had this little city that is really cool. The last time I did my rotation to the National Training Center was the first time getting to experience this little kind of mock-up city that you do a scenario inside of. Now, not everybody will do the scenario inside the city, but if you do get the chance to do it, it is pretty cool because it's kind of rigged up Hollywood style. I mean, there's a lot of cool special effects, well, not really special effects, but pyrotechnics and actors and everything that kind of play a role in the scenario. When I was there, they had this little city, and our mission was to go to the embassy inside the city and talk to some of the local leaders about some of the problems that were going on in the city. They have actors that are out there that are trying to sell you stuff as you're trying to go through the city. They're trying to sell you, food and all sorts of craziness. There's people just walking around. It very much feels very realistic to Iraq when I was there. And once we got to that little city, they had an explosion happen in the distance. So you heard that happening. There was another convoy that, supposedly got hit, and you would have a soldier that was playing the victim that got blown up in that convoy and was trying to draw you out of the little gates of that embassy. We didn't fall for that. We were trying to get that soldier to come into the gates of the embassy where we had security set up. They were trying to lure us out, as part of the training, and we didn't fall for it. So he ended up leaving and going back to where his convoy was at. So we, of course, had to go help them out. So we go over there, we help them out, and they have actors that are actually amputees that were missing like their leg and stuff, and all this fake blood and fake, meat hanging off their leg. It was really gnarly looking, but at the same time, a crazy experience. If you were someone maybe who had been in a real life situation of that in Iraq or Afghanistan, that could probably cause some pretty serious flashbacks. But for somebody who didn't have to really experience quite that gnarly of a situation, it was pretty crazy to see. You know that it's fake, so you're like, holy crap, you're kind of just appreciating, the work that went into this to make it so realistic, but also a little bit like, holy crap, this would be nuts to have to deal with this in a real life scenario. So you're trying to help out these people who, you know, are simulating that they got their legs blown off and blood is everywhere, and you're trying to help them get loaded into a vehicle, and then at the same time you get ambushed. So during that ambush, they had a fake RPG that came across a fishing wire and came shooting from a window down to another area where a pyrotechnics went off to create a blast with all this like styrofoam brick and rock that went flying through the air, and it was nuts. So then you're getting engaged by the enemy. You have these Op 4 people that are doing this, you know, assault on you, and you have to react to that. So there's this crazy, like, intense little battle that you kind of got into that probably lasted, I don't know, a good half hour or so. I ended up getting killed in that scenario. We were in a Humvee that got separated from everybody else, and we tried to defend ourselves. Our vehicle had been disabled by the OCs, so we were kind of just stuck there in an alleyway. Someone left to try to go get support for us, and we were left on our own, and then eventually we got gunned down. So very realistic training, but at the same time, you kind of appreciate the hard work that went into it to make it so realistic, and it was pretty intense, and definitely something that was, you know, fun because it's training. You know, real life situation would not be so fun in that situation, but when you understand that it's just training, you treat it seriously, but at the same time afterwards, you're like, holy crap, that was pretty cool. But that was really just one day out of the whole entire training. The rest of the time you're doing other missions that are related to what you would do in a combat situation. They have little villages out there that have role players that are out there, you know, treating it as if, you know, it's a city or a little town or a little village, and they're living out there for that entire 2 weeks, you know, to react to these scenarios that are being brought upon them and being brought upon us to be able to, you know, treat it as if it's a combat deployment to a desert environment. So then after that 2 weeks is over, you're going into the last week, which is kind of like the turn-in week, and you have to turn in your vehicles and your equipment. And I feel like sometimes they kind of want that equipment and those vehicles to be in better condition than they were when you initially got them. So sometimes that can be a little bit of a lengthy process. You're trying to fix pieces on that vehicle or that equipment that, you know, is broken, that wasn't broken before, and sometimes they'll find little gigs here and there, and you're like, that's how I got it, but there's, you know, not a whole lot you can do about it. You got to fix it. I mean, during the initial draw phase, if there are things wrong with that vehicle before you draw it, you can bring it up and make them fix it ahead of time. But sometimes there's things that you don't notice, things you don't detect, and then now they find that stuff, even though it was already like that when you got the vehicle or the equipment, but now it's on you to make sure that stuff gets taken care of before you can turn that vehicle in. That's usually one of the weeks that everybody kind of dreads. It's a horrible week of trying to get this equipment turned in so that you can go home. But then they kind of stagger it out as far as some people will be leaving at this time, other people will be leaving a day or two later or whatever. So it starts kind of dwindling down of how many people are there to kind of help you get these vehicles turned in usually. And that part kind of sucks, but usually they try to organize it out to where you're not stuck, you know, turning your vehicle in by yourself. You still have some support, and sometimes that may require them to push out your flight date or whatever so we can get this equipment turned in, because we have to be 100% everything turned in, everything rail headed back on the train if something's going back, you know, and all that stuff before everybody leaves from the National Training Center. So this whole process takes roughly about a month, usually not exactly 30 days, because then that requires the military to have to pay for separation pay. So they try to, you know, get it as close as possible. Maybe it's 28 days, maybe it's 29 days. Sometimes it just kind of depends, but only married individuals would get that separation pay. So a lot of times they will, you know, push out those married people maybe first before some of the single soldiers, because they don't have to pay separation pay to single soldiers. So that sucks for like the single soldiers, you know, it's kind of a rough situation. So if you're a single soldier, expect sometimes National Training Center to last a little bit longer than maybe some of those married individuals. So that is some of my experience with the National Training Center. If I have anybody out there that have recently maybe gone to the National Training Center, maybe leave some comments down below. How has it changed since the last time I went? Is it pretty much still the same? Is there certain factors that are a little bit different? If you've been through that small little city they have in the National Training Center, what was your experience like of going through that training? Or if you have some questions about what that training is like for the National Training Center, make sure to leave some comments down below as well. Now, me, myself, I think I did roughly about 5 rotations to the National Training Center. If I have any veterans out there or even active duty who have done the National Training Center, leave some comments down below. How many times have you been stuck doing the National Training Center rotation? So there you go, that is my take, my information that I wanted to kind of share with you guys about the National Training Center. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up. Check out some links down in the description, as well as some recommended videos over here on the side. Thank you so much for watching. I'm ThatChrisChaos, and I will see you next time. See ya.